black garbage bag lay pressed against the curb of High Street under a noon sun that read 92 degrees. It didn't tremble from the wind, it trembled with the breath of something inside. Sunlight made the plastic gleam. The bag's edge fluttered like a mouth trying to swallow its own air. Around me, people walked by earbuds, coffee cups, phones, ordinary life. Only that bag felt eerily, unbearably out of place. I stopped. A sharp ammonia smell stabbed my nose, and beneath it a thin, haspy sound like someone forcing a breath through plastic. Taped to the mouth of the bag was a scrap of paper stuck down with yellow tape, the handwriting crooked and hurried free. Do not open. No period. No explanation. Just a cold command in broad daylight. I bent down. The thin plastic rose and fell with the rhythm of something dying inside. I put my hand on it. The plastic was warm like skin. My throat closed. I ripped the tape. Wrought iron and pure panic hit me at once. It wasn't trash. It was a Doberman puppy, 3, maybe 4 months old, soaked, trembling ears, folded a dark bruise around the neck where the tape had been dug in. Its brown eyes blinked weakly in the sun, trying to read whether anyone would stop for it this time. I didn't think. I stripped off my jacket and held it to my chest, and in that raspy, shallow breath, I knew if I didn't do something in the next 10 seconds, it would be gone. I never thought a garbage bag would be the thing to stop me on a summer noon. People passed it as if it didn't exist. A girl with earbuds walked by, her pace never changing. A man pushing a cart slid past. Even the sanitation worker glanced and moved to the next bin. In a busy city like Columbus, everything moves to its own rhythm. Only the fear inside that bag was out of time. I crouched, peeled back the tape. The plastic stuck to my skin, hot and burning under the sun. A faint groan escaped from inside, weak, urgent. I didn't need to see to know what it was. It was the sound of life running out. I ripped harder. The tape sliced my finger. Blood welled, but I didn't stop. A gap opened, and brown eyes glinted in the dark. Not trash. A body trying to breathe. I slid my hand in and felt wet, hot fur. It twitched once, then stilled. I eased it out careful, as if I might break something made of shadow. A Doberman puppy female, maybe 3 or 4 months. She folded into herself just right inside the bag. Her belly was hollowed. The ribs stood out like a topography of hunger. She squinted at the light, dazed, and her neck bore a round bruise where the tape had been tight. Oh, God. My voice sounded rough, like it belonged to someone else. She didn't cry, didn't bark, only opened her mouth as if to call, then shut it. I stripped off my denim jacket and wrapped her in it. Heat from my chest, and the faint failing breaths from her mixed trembling and indistinct. I lifted her. She felt as light as a wet scrap of paper. A man stopped, shook his head, and kept walking. The street kept doing what it did. Either nobody saw or nobody wanted to. I hailed a cab. When it pulled up, the driver lowered his window and squinted. "What's that?" "A dog," I said, breathless. "She's dying." He hesitated. "I don't want trouble." I looked at him and forced my voice steady. "There's no trouble. Just life. 10 minutes, please." He sighed and unlocked the door. I slid in, holding Raven to my chest. The smell of plastic and blood and her shallow breath mixed with gasoline and hot sun. I kept my hand on her heart, counting 1, 2, 3, and then a beat missed. My own heart stopped with it, then a 4th beat came. Weak, but there. I whispered, "Come on, Raven. Hear me. Just a little more." The car jolted over a pothole. Her head lolled. I thought we'd lost her. The city seemed to hold its breath in that instant. Then she breathed again, wheezy, ragged, but she breathed. Olentangy Animal Clinic. I told the driver, fast. He didn't ask. We ran red lights. The siren of a distant ambulance sounded like a reprimand. Raven, in my arms, was a soaked scrap, her little head rubbing at my wrist hot as if she'd been warmed by a fever. I pressed my thumb to her lip and felt a fragile thread of breath. "Don't sleep," I murmured. "We're almost there." Her eyes fluttered open slowly. For a second I thought I saw a tiny stubborn spark still inside them. When the car stopped, I bolted inside. The glass door slammed behind us. The sterile scent of disinfectant and the harsh white lights, everything felt too cold, too clean for what I was carrying. I shouted, "Someone help, she's still breathing." The receptionist only shook her head. "We don't take strays without paperwork or an appointment." "I'm sorry." The word sorry landed on the tile like a stone. I stood there with Raven in my arms, listening to her breath break like a frayed cord. I walked back out. If the system turned her away, then I would learn how to save her myself. Stepping into the late sun, I felt the heat on my neck, but my hands only felt the warmth of that small body still trembling. And I knew, though I couldn't say how right or wrong it was, that I would not let go of her again. The clinic said no. The taxi drove away. It was just me, Raven, and the last slant of sunlight crossing the sidewalk like a faint golden thread. I had no plan in my head, only one thought: keep this breath alive. I got back to my small apartment on Neal Avenue, a place just big enough for one person and a stack of ungraded papers. When I opened the door, cool air from the AC spilled out and Raven curled tighter in my arms, as if trying to hide from this new world. I shut the door and laid her gently on the wooden table. The window light caught on her wet fur, matted and sticky, reflecting streaks of dark red near her chest, where her breath fluttered paper thin. I knew nothing about veterinary care, but I knew one thing: this fragile thing needed warmth. I turned on the faucet, letting warm water run. The kitchen sink meant for dishes became an emergency station. When I set Raven down, she twitched, eyes flicking open and closed, unsure where safety was anymore. I whispered, "It's okay, little one. You're safe now." My voice sounded strange, shaky, yet certain, like a promise made with no witness. I dipped a hand towel into the water and began wiping her down, slow and careful. The water turned gray, carrying the smell of garbage rust and faint chemical bleach from the bag. Every time the cloth touched her skin, she flinched, weak but responsive. I thanked whatever power was listening. Alive. She was still alive. I peeled off my old t-shirt and wrapped it around her. It was damp with sweat, smelled of coffee and chalk dust, the scent of a human life, the only comfort I could offer. When I drew her close, Raven pressed her nose into my shirt, whimpered softly, and went still. Her body was still hot, but no longer shaking. I ran down to the corner store, bought warm milk, and a small jar of honey. Back home, I found a plastic syringe, poured the milk in, and eased out a few drops onto her tongue. At first, no reaction. Then her lips twitched. She swallowed. 1, 2, 3 drops. I smiled quietly, like someone hearing music in tune for the first time after years of silence. I dabbed a bit of honey on my fingertip and held it near her nose. Raven licked it barely, but it was the first real sign of life returning. I grabbed a cardboard box, lined it with a towel, and set it in the middle of the kitchen. The room that had always been silent, now filled with unfamiliar sounds, shallow breathing, the tick of the wall clock, the soft drip from the faucet. Every sound meant something new. Every second was a chance someone else had thrown away. Night fell. Raven slept in my shirt, her breath uneven, sometimes jerking. I sat beside her, lights off, the faint gold from the street slipping through the blinds. Every now and then, she whimpered and buried her head deeper into the fabric. I laid my hand on her back, feeling the fragile rhythm, 3 beats in, 2 out. I counted along, afraid that if I stopped, she might stop too. I stayed like that until her breathing steadied enough for me to close my eyes. Sometime past midnight, a faint sound woke me, a small smacking noise. Raven was dreaming, tongue-flicking, as if still tasting that first trace of honey. I laughed in the dark. A quiet laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from myself in a very long time. Before I drifted off again, I whispered, "Tomorrow we start over. One small step at a time." Outside, the wind moved through the old oak at the corner, and in my little kitchen real warmth had finally returned. Things seemed to be getting better. Raven could already run around the kitchen, her short tail wagging like a tiny propeller. She'd bark softly when I came home from teaching and curl up on my feet while I graded papers. Life had returned, gentle quiet, so peaceful that I began to believe fear had finally left this apartment for good. But memories have their own way of coming back. That afternoon, I was cleaning the kitchen. There was an empty plastic bag on the counter. I grabbed it, ready to toss it, when the sound came. Shrt, a small sound. Dry, harmless nothing anyone else would notice. But Raven froze instantly. She had been standing by her water bowl. Now she went rigid, her whole body tightening like a pulled wire. Her eyes widened, whites showing. "Raven." I called softly, but she didn't hear. The bag slipped from the counter. It hit the floor with a faint rustle, and in that split second the room stopped breathing. Raven collapsed, sliding backward into the corner, pressing herself flat against the floor tail, jammed between her legs. A sound broke from her throat, not a simple whimper of fear, but the raw echo of a memory replaying itself as if that bag had just swallowed her breath all over again. I threw the bag aside and dropped to my knees. "It's okay, baby girl. Look at me, look at me." But she trembled, eyes locked on the spot where the bag had fallen. I didn't touch her. I just sat there, one hand resting on the floor, letting my warmth reach her without forcing it. We stayed like that for a long time. Minute by minute, Raven's breathing slowed. From frantic to fragile, I could feel my own heartbeat syncing with hers, steady, slow, patient. That night, I looked up everything I could about trauma, triggers, and abused animals. One line stayed with me. A familiar sound can reawaken the entire memory of fear, as if it were happening again. I read under the dim yellow light, and Raven lay beside me, her head resting on my knee. Each time the wind brushed the curtains, she still flinched, but then she'd look at me as if asking, "Still safe?" I nodded. Her folded ears quivered slightly, a silent answer tender enough to break your heart. From that night on, I began a small ritual. Every evening, I placed an empty plastic bag on the table. Each night, I moved a little closer, always slow, always making sure Raven saw me. At first, she hid behind the chair. Then she dared to watch, then to sniff, and a week later, she placed her nose against the bag without running away. I said nothing. I simply laid my hand on her neck right where the bruise from the tape used to be. Her heartbeat thumped fast beneath my palm, then slowed. I could feel it change, not born of forgetting, but of forgiveness. She wasn't erasing the past. She was learning to live beyond it. That night, before I went to sleep, Raven rested her head on my legs. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, wrapping us both in a thin veil of silver. I stroked her back and whispered, "No one's ever going to lock you up again. No one." Raven stirred, sighed once, and for the first time since that day she slept peacefully without fear. I thought the worst was behind us. Until that night. Raven lay curled in the corner, not from fear, but from exhaustion. She hadn't eaten all day. The water bowl was still full. When I touched her head, I knew immediately something was wrong. Hot, dry, and trembling. I turned her over. Her chest rose too fast, her breath shallow. Her eyes were dull, slow to react. No, 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 don't do this to me, I whispered, even as my hands were already moving. I set her down on an old towel and ran to grab the pet thermometer. The number blinked back at me, 104.8 degree. A real fever. For a frail puppy like her, that could mean the end. I turned on the shower, letting steam fill the bathroom, then carried Raven inside. Not to bathe her, to make a room of warm air and hope. I wrapped her in a damp towel, laid her head on my knee, and dripped water onto her cracked lips. The soft yellow light from the small bulb trembled on the tiles, casting rings that pulsed like her fading breath. I found the leftover antibiotics from the last vet visit, measured the dose with trembling hands. When the needle went in, Raven flinched, then weakly licked my finger, as if apologizing for hurting. "Why are you sorry for being in pain?" I murmured, my voice breaking. Time lost its shape. I sat on the wet floor, one hand keeping the towel in place, ears tuned to every breath she took. Whenever it went quiet for too long, I leaned close, ready to call her back. Outside, the city went on honking cars, music, laughter. But in that small room, there was only one man and one life fighting against the heat. It was close to midnight. My back was drenched in sweat. Raven still burned. I opened a water bottle, soaked a cloth, and wiped down her neck, then pressed my palm to her chest. Still beating, but slower. Weaker. "Come on, Raven. You've done this once before. Do it again." My voice rasped, repeating like a prayer. Through the haze of steam, my mind drifted back to that afternoon, the trembling black bag on the sidewalk. The memory cut through me like glass. I felt anger, not just at whoever abandoned her, but at a world where kindness has to fight for every inch of ground it gets. Then Raven stirred. A small whimper escaped her. Her eyes opened cloudy, but with light still inside. She lifted her head, searching for me. When I leaned closer, she nudged my wrist with her nose, weak but deliberate. And I broke. Not out of fear of losing her, but because I finally understood she wasn't giving up on life as easily as I'd thought. We stayed like that until dawn. Her fever began to fade. I felt it when her nose cooled and grew damp again. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let out a breath I must have been holding all night. Raven slept in my lap, her chest rising in a steady rhythm. I ran a hand down her spine and whispered, "You don't know it, but you just taught me how to believe in miracles." Outside, the first light of morning slipped through the curtains. It wasn't bright, just soft, tender, like the warmth of something newly reborn. And I knew then we had survived another night. 3 weeks after the fever, Raven could stand again. Not the trembling kind of standing, she stood firm, steady on her own strength. Every step she took now came with a sound, claws tapping against the floor, tick, 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 soft and rhythmic, like a melody I hadn't known my life was missing. I bought her a new leather harness, light brown and gentle, snug, but never tight. When I buckled it around her neck, she looked up at me, shy yet trusting. "All right, Raven," I said softly. "Today we go outside." The early October air carried the damp scent of soil, the faint bitterness of coffee from the corner cafe, and the hiss of a city bus turning onto the avenue. Raven hesitated at the doorway, her nose trembling. "It's okay," I murmured, touching her shoulder. "You've got me." We stepped out slowly, cautiously. Everything was new to her. The rustle of dry leaves, the grind of tires on asphalt, the distant honk of a horn. Each sound was a test of her memory. At first, she walked beside me, tail low, eyes alert. But when we turned into Goodale Park, the world seemed to open up. Sunlight spilled across the pond, glinting off the bare branches. A few other dogs chased balls across the grass. Children laughed. Bicycle bells chimed. Raven stopped, tilted her head, and her ears perked high. "Go on," I whispered. "You're safe." And then she moved, one step, two, then she began to run. Slow at first, uneven, then faster, lighter, freer. Running, truly running. Her four legs cut through the wind, the harness bouncing lightly, ears folding back. Sunlight shimmered on her black coat, catching deep russet tones beneath. I stood there, heart pounding, to match her stride, smiling through blurred vision. She turned to look back at me, and for the first time since that day I saw Raven smile with her eyes. No more fear, no more flinching. Only joy. Pure, unfiltered joy, the kind that comes from reclaiming the world. But then the wind shifted. A dry rustle came from the garbage bin nearby. A black plastic bag caught the breeze, tumbled across the grass, and rolled toward us. Raven froze. I saw her body tighten, trembling just slightly, but unmistakably. Her gaze locked onto the object, every muscle stiff. The park vanished around her. The old fear had come alive again. I knelt down, voice barely above a whisper. "Raven, look at me. It's just a bag. It can't hurt you anymore." I didn't move closer. I simply opened my hand and held it out in the air, waiting. The wind kept blowing. The bag drifted, then came to rest in the grass between us. Raven inhaled sharply, her body trembling. Then one step, slow, very slow. I held my breath, said nothing. She lowered her head, sniffed. The bag rustled faintly. Raven flinched half a step back, then stopped. She drew another breath, deep, deliberate. I watched her shoulders drop, her frame loosen, her tail flicker once. And then she did something I never expected. She touched the bag. A soft, decisive tap of her nose. The bag rolled slightly, catching a glint of sunlight. Raven watched it go, then turned and ran toward me, mouth open, tongue out, panting with pride. I opened my arms. She dove into them, pressing her head against my chest. "Good girl. Good girl, baby," I whispered through tears. We sat beneath the oak tree. Raven curled tight against my legs, breathing evenly, eyes fixed on the shimmering lake ahead. And for the first time I saw her truly free, not because there was no leash, but because she had forgiven the sound of the world. That morning, I didn't wake to the alarm. I woke to the sound of small footsteps tapping across the wooden floor. The rhythm was familiar, soft, steady, and it stopped right outside my door. Then came a gentle whine, just enough to stir the quiet. "I know, Raven," I murmured, my voice still heavy with sleep. When I opened the door, she was already there, black and tan, fur glimmering in the first gold light of morning, brown eyes clear and steady, looking straight at me. There was no trace of fear in them anymore. Only trust, pure, unguarded trust, the kind even people sometimes forget how to have. We walked our usual morning route, down the calm street past the little cafe where the elderly owner always left me a donut labeled, "For the kind man and his brave dog." Raven knew every turn. She always stopped at the corner of the park where sunlight spilled through the trees, then looked back at me as if to say, "See, we made it." "No fear this time," I smiled. "I see it, baby girl, I see it." My life, once filled with quiet but empty spaces, now had its own rhythm. The rhythm of Raven's breathing as she slept. The rhythm of her paws scratching gently at the door when I came home. The rhythm of a creature who couldn't speak yet, said everything just by being there. At night, when I graded papers, she always lay beneath the desk, her head resting on my feet. Whenever I sighed, she would lift her head, press her nose gently against my knee as if asking, "You okay?" I'd rest my hand on her head, stroke the length of her back where the scars used to be. Now there was only soft, warm fur. Sometimes I'd wonder who really saved who here, because maybe when I pulled Raven from that black bag, she pulled me out of one too, the bag of loneliness, exhaustion, and a faith that had long since burned out. When I took Raven to the rescue center for her follow-up checkup, a young nurse bent down to pet her and asked, "Will you be finding her a family?" I smiled. She already found one. I said, "Right here." That night, I fastened a small metal tag to her collar. It read, "Raven, found not lost." She lifted her head, ears twitching as if she understood every word. Winter came. Snow blanketed the sidewalks of Columbus. Raven and I often sat by the window watching it drift down over the rooftops. Sometimes she'd nudge my hand with her cold nose, a quiet reminder I'm still here. And every time I looked into her eyes, I saw not just loyalty, but a kind of love beyond words. The love of a soul, once abandoned, who still chose to trust the world again. I've learned something since then. People can throw a life away, but if one person, just one, decides to stop, that can change everything. I watched Raven sleep, her chest rising and falling, her tail twitching even in dreams. I brushed my hand lightly across her fur and whispered, "Thank you for staying, and thank you for teaching me how to love again." Outside, the city went on, cars, voices, the noise of life. But inside that small apartment on Neil Avenue, everything was still except for the soft breathing of a Doberman once left to die and the heartbeat of a man who once thought he had nothing left. Two souls, two scars, one home. There was nothing left to say, only the warm, quiet light of trust covering everything. Some souls don't need words, they understand through the heart. When you rescue an animal, sometimes, you're the one being rescued. Every pleading gaze is an invitation to prove that kindness still exists. If you've ever stopped in the street because of a small cry, if you've ever reached out to a trembling life, if you've ever believed that one small act can change someone's entire world, then share this story so others know that miracles don't only live in fairy tales. Support your local shelters. Adopt, don't shop. Or simply don't look away when you see a pair of eyes asking for help. Because sometimes we don't need to do something grand to save the world. We just need to do something kind at the right moment for a small soul that needs a reason to believe this world is still good. Thank you for listening to my story and Raven's. If it touched you, leave a share the video and tell us, have you ever rescued or been rescued by a soul like hers? Because sometimes every journey begins with a single fragile breath, and someone who decides to stop.